What is the ultimate betrayal? Is it a husband leaving his wife of 7 years for another woman? Or is it when he does it for money, cruelly telling her she's not enough because she's content with a simple life? Ethan Cole thought he was trading up, leaving his quiet, unassuming wife for the glamorous daughter of a real estate tycoon. He mocked her simple job, her frugal habits, and her gentle nature. He had no idea the woman he discarded, the woman he thought was worth nothing, was quietly sitting on one of the largest hidden fortunes in the world. This isn't a story about a woman scorned. This is the story of an empire striking back. The scent of rain-soaked pavement and old paper was Emma Finch's perfume. It clung to her clothes from her part-time job at the university's rare books archive and followed her home to the small third-floor walk-up she shared with her husband, Ethan Cole. Their apartment was a testament to love on a budget, mismatched mugs collected from thrift stores, a slightly wobbly dining table Ethan had proudly fixed himself, and framed photos of their 7 years together lining the hallway. For Emma, it was a sanctuary, a life she had deliberately chosen, a life that was authentically hers. For Ethan, it was becoming a cage. He stood by the window, staring down at the glistening streetlights of the city. He wasn't seeing the beauty of the post-rain glow. He was seeing the reflections of the luxury cars that drove past, the distant lights of penthouse apartments, the world he felt he was meant for, but was stuck looking at from below. He loosened the tie from his mid-level analyst job at Thorne Development, a position that paid the bills, but barely skimmed the surface of his ambitions. "Rough day." Emma's voice was soft as she came up behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist. She rested her cheek against his back. He didn't relax into her touch as he once did. He remained rigid, a statue of discontent. "The usual," he muttered. "Another meeting where Arthur Thorne's helicopter lands on the roof while I'm calculating if we can afford to get the car's transmission looked at." Emma sighed softly. "We're okay, Ethan. We have enough. We have..." "Enough?" He spun around, pulling away from her. The sudden movement startled her. His eyes, usually warm and brown, were hard as flint. "Enough is not what I want, Emma. I don't want to spend my life worrying about transmission fluid and buying discounted groceries. I want the life he has. The power, the respect." "That's not respect, it's fear," she said quietly. "And Arthur Thorne is a shark. Everyone knows it." "Maybe you have to be a shark to get out of the fishbowl," he shot back. His voice was louder now, echoing in their small living room. "You just don't get it. You're content. You're happy in this little box with your dusty books and your 5-year-old coat. I'm not." The words stung more than he could know. Her contentment wasn't a flaw. It was a hard-won prize. Her 5-year-old coat was a deliberate choice, but she couldn't tell him that. The secret she carried was a weight in a shield, one she had borne for a decade to ensure that any love she found would be for her, not for her name, not for the Blackwood fortune. The argument ended as they always did lately, with Ethan retreating into a moody silence and Emma feeling a growing chasm between them. The real trouble, however, had a name: Isabel Thorne. Isabel was Arthur Thorne's only daughter, a woman sculpted from arrogance and privilege. With sharp features, a wardrobe that cost more than Ethan's annual salary, and a predator's eye for weakness, she had taken an interest in the handsome, ambitious analyst who seemed to worship the ground her father walked on. Ethan had met her at a company gala a month prior. While Emma had been at home, carefully mending a seam on one of his favorite shirts, Ethan was being charmed by a woman who smelled of money and opportunity. Isabel had leaned in close, her voice a low purr. "My father says you're one of the sharpest minds in the acquisitions department, but you look underutilized." That single sentence had lit a fire in him. For weeks, their chance encounters at the office became less and less coincidental. A shared elevator ride turned into coffee. Coffee turned into a discreet lunch at a restaurant far from his usual haunts. Isabel painted a picture of a life he craved: a corner office, a seat on the board, a black card with no limit. All he had to do was prove he was the kind of man who belonged in her world, a man unburdened by a simple, unambitious wife. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. Emma had just finished restoring a fragile 18th century manuscript, her hands steady and her mind at peace. She'd stopped on her way home to buy his favorite steak, a small extravagance to try and bridge the gap that had been widening between them. She was humming as she let herself into the apartment, the keys jingling softly. The sight that greeted her froze the tune in her throat. Ethan was there, but so were two suitcases. His. They were standing by the door, packed and ready. He was wearing a new suit, one she'd never seen before. It was impeccably tailored, expensive. It wasn't his. "Ethan, what's going on? Are you going on a business trip?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. He couldn't meet her eyes. He straightened his new silk tie. "Emma, we need to talk." And there it was, the four words that shatter worlds. "I'm leaving you," he said, the words blunt and cold. "This isn't working anymore. I can't live like this." Emma felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. "Live like what? What are you talking about? We can talk this through. We can—" "No, we can't," he interrupted, finally looking at her. There was no sadness in his eyes, only a chilling resolve. "I've been given an opportunity, Emma. A real one. A life. I'm with Isabel Thorne." The name hit her like a physical blow. Arthur Thorne's daughter. It all clicked into place. The late nights, the new suit, the simmering resentment. It wasn't just another woman. It was a symbol. He wasn't leaving her for love. He was leaving her for a stock portfolio. "You're leaving me for Arthur Thorne's daughter?" she whispered, the steak forgotten in its grocery bag on the floor. "Don't make this so pathetic," he sneered, a cruel twist to his lips she'd never seen. "Isabel sees my potential. She supports my ambition. She's not content to just exist. We're moving into her penthouse tonight. My promotion to vice president was just approved." Tears welled in Emma's eyes, hot and shameful. 7 years, Ethan. Our vows. Our life together. Does that mean nothing? "It means we wanted different things," he said, his voice devoid of any emotion. He walked past her, picking up his suitcases. He paused at the door, turning back to deliver the final, devastating blow. "I'm sorry, Emma, but I need a woman who can build an empire with me, not one who is happy to just dust the furniture in it. You could never give me the life I deserve." He didn't know. He had absolutely no idea. The irony was so thick, so suffocating, it almost made her laugh through the tears. The woman he was calling a simple dust gatherer could buy and sell Arthur Thorne's entire concrete empire with the stroke of a pen and not even notice the dip in her accounts. The life he deserved was a pittance compared to the one she had willingly walked away from, all in the naive hope of finding something real. He opened the door. "My lawyer will be in touch. I want this done quickly and cleanly. I'll be fair. You can have the apartment and what's in the savings. It's not much, but it's more than you'd have without me." He was gone. The door clicked shut, the sound echoing the finality of a coffin lid closing. Emma sank to the floor, her body racked with sobs. She wasn't just crying for the loss of her husband or the humiliation of his betrayal. She was crying for the death of her beautiful, fragile illusion. The simple life she had built was a lie, and the man she had given her heart to had just proven he was exactly the kind of person she had run away to escape. After the storm of grief passed, something else began to bubble up from the depths. It was cold, it was hard, and it was utterly unfamiliar to the gentle woman who loved old books. It was the Blackwood spirit, a dormant, ruthless instinct for survival and for retribution. He wanted an empire. She would show him what a real empire looked like, and then she would watch it burn him to the ground. Part 2. The Phoenix Unveiled. For 2 weeks, Emma allowed herself to grieve. She existed in the shell of the life they had built, the silence of the apartment amplifying Ethan's parting words. "You could never give me the life I deserve." The phrase played on a loop, each repetition chipping away at the soft-hearted Emma Finch and revealing the tempered steel of Emma Blackwood beneath. The divorce papers arrived via a smug courier, as impersonal as a pizza delivery. The terms were as insulting as Ethan's final speech. He was magnanimously leaving her their joint savings account, which held a paltry $7,300, the worn-out furniture, and the lease on the apartment. He was taking the car, the one she'd paid the down payment on, and legally absolving himself of any future claims. He wanted it over in 30 days, cleanly. Emma looked at the papers, her tears finally dry. The hurt was morphing into a glacial calm. She picked up her phone, but she didn't call a divorce lawyer. She dialed a number she hadn't called in 3 years, a number that connected her to a different world entirely. The voice that answered was crisp, familiar, and tinged with British patience. "Harrison." "Mr. Harrison," Emma said, her own voice steadier than she expected. "It's Emma." There was a pause, then a warmth infused his tone. "Miss Emma, it is a profound relief to hear your voice. Is everything all right?" Mr. Alistair Harrison was the chief counsel for Blackwood Global, the sprawling multinational conglomerate her family owned. More than that, he had been her late grandfather's most trusted confidant, a man who had known her since she was a child and was one of the few who understood her desire for a normal life. He was her designated emergency contact, her link back to the world she had fled. "Not exactly, Mr. Harrison," she said, her eyes scanning the divorce papers. "My experiment in normalcy has concluded. It seems I made a poor investment." "I see," he said, the two words carrying a universe of meaning. He didn't pry or ask for details of the heartbreak he could surely hear in her voice. He was all business. "What do you require?" "I need you to do 2 things. First, accept these divorce terms on my behalf. Immediately. Don't contest a single thing. Give him exactly what he wants." "Miss Emma, if I may, that seems necessary," she finished. "Let him think he has won. Let him believe I am broken and destitute. It's crucial to what comes next." There was a brief silence as Harrison processed the tactical nature of her request. "Very well. And the second thing?" A faint, mirthless smile touched Emma's lips. "I'm coming back to the board, and I want you to liquidate $100 million from my personal trust. We're going to start a new holding company. I already have a name for it." "And what would that be?" "Phoenix Ascendant Holdings," she said. "It's time to rise from the ashes." Meanwhile, Ethan Cole was living his dream, or rather, Isabel Thorne's version of it. He had moved into her sterile, glass-walled penthouse overlooking the city. His closet was now filled with designer suits, his wrist adorned with a heavy gold watch, and he was chauffeured to work in a gleaming black Rolls-Royce. He was the new vice president of acquisitions at Thorne Development, a title that came with a corner office and the sycophantic respect of his former peers. He and Isabel became a fixture in the city's social scene. They were photographed at charity galas and exclusive restaurant openings. Ethan, high on his newfound status, loved the attention. He would regale people with a carefully edited story of his past, painting himself as a brilliant mind held back by a timid, unambitious marriage, now finally unleashed by a woman who truly understood him. "Emma? Oh, she was sweet," he'd say to a rapt audience, a dismissive wave of his hand. "Very simple woman, happy with her books. But you can't conquer the world from a library. Isabel, she's a titan. We're a power couple." Isabel would smile, a proprietary hand on his arm. She enjoyed the narrative. It made her look like a savior, a discerning woman who could spot untapped potential. But in private, the gloss began to wear thin. The life he craved came with strings. "Don't wear that tie, Ethan. It makes you look like you're still trying too hard," she'd comment as he got ready. "My father wants to see you. Don't talk about your humble beginnings. He finds it terribly common. Did you really think that proposal for the waterfront project was innovative? It was pedestrian. I had to smooth it over with Daddy." Her words were little cuts, constant reminders that he was a guest in this world, not a native. He was her project, her accessory. The power he thought he had was merely borrowed from her father, and she never let him forget it. He started to feel less like a partner and more like a high-end employee, even in his own home. He pushed the feeling down, convincing himself it was the price of admission. 1 month after the divorce was finalized, the first tremor was felt at Thorne Development. Arthur Thorne, a man who built his empire on aggressive, highly leveraged deals, was in the final stages of acquiring a smaller, rival firm, Sky High Properties. It was a keystone deal, one that would give him a monopoly over the city's most valuable commercial real estate. Ethan was leading the due diligence team. It was his chance to prove his worth. Then out of nowhere, the deal collapsed. An unknown entity, a brand new holding company no one had ever heard of, Phoenix Ascendant Holdings, had swept in at the 11th hour and purchased sky-high properties outright in cash. It wasn't a negotiation, it was an execution. They paid 20% over Thorne's highest offer, a move so audacious and cash-heavy that it sent shockwaves through the financial district. Arthur Thorne was apoplectic. "Who the hell are these people?" he roared in a boardroom meeting, his face purple. "Find out. I want to know everything. Who is behind Phoenix Ascendant?" Ethan and his team scrambled, but it was like chasing a ghost. Phoenix Ascendant was a fortress of legal firewalls. Registered in Delaware, managed by a Swiss law firm, with its funding routed through a labyrinth of offshore accounts. The only name they could find associated with it was its legal representative, Alistair Harrison. The name meant nothing to them. Emma, from a temporary state-of-the-art office that Harrison had set up for her in a discreet downtown building, watched the fallout on a bank of monitors. She had shed her mousy brown hair for the sleek, dark black she was born with, her simple clothes replaced by sharp, tailored business attire. She looked every inch the Blackwood heiress she was. "The acquisition of Sky High is complete, Miss Emma," Harrison reported, placing a file on her desk. "Thorne is bleeding from the lost opportunity costs, just as you predicted." "Good," Emma said, her eyes fixed on a news article detailing Thorne Development's stock dip. "He leveraged 3 other projects to finance that deal. Now he's overextended. What's next on the list?" Harrison pointed to another file. "The Argent Materials Corporation. They are the sole supplier of the specialized reinforced steel that Thorne needs for his flagship project, the Elysian Towers." Emma remembered the Elysian Towers. Ethan had spoken of it with religious fervor. It was to be his masterpiece, a twin-tower luxury condominium complex that would reshape the city's skyline. It was his monument to his own success. "He told me once that Thorne has them on an exclusive but deeply discounted contract that's up for renewal next month," Emma recalled, a flicker of memory from a time when he still shared his work dreams with her. He had been so proud of that detail, a small cost-saving measure he had identified. "He was careless with his pillow talk," she added, her voice flat. "Indeed," Harrison said, a ghost of a smile on his face. "Argent Materials is publicly traded, and their stock is currently undervalued. An aggressive buyout is feasible." "Do it," Emma commanded without hesitation. "Buy a controlling interest in Argent Materials, and when Thorne's contract comes up for renewal, I want the price of his steel to be quadrupled, and I want the terms to be cash on delivery, no credit." "He'll be strangled," Harrison noted, not with disapproval, but with professional appreciation for the strategy. "That's the point," Emma said, turning to look out her own window at a skyline she was about to redraw. "Ethan wanted an empire. It's important he understands that empires are not just built. They can also be taken. The fallout from the Sky High Properties debacle was just the beginning. For the next 2 months, Phoenix Ascendant moved like a phantom predator, silently and methodically dismantling the foundations of Arthur Thorne's empire. It wasn't a frontal assault. It was death by 1,000 cuts, executed with a precision that was both terrifying and brilliant. Phoenix Ascendant acquired a mid-sized logistics company that held the exclusive transport contracts for Thorne's construction sites. Overnight, transportation costs doubled, and schedules were thrown into chaos. They bought out a small, innovative tech firm that had developed the proprietary smart home security systems slated for the Elysian Towers. That technology was now off the market, forcing Thorne's architects into a costly and time-consuming redesign. Each move was strategic, targeting a vulnerability Emma knew about from years of listening to Ethan's work complaints and triumphs. He had, in his arrogance, provided her with the very blueprint she now used to destroy him. For Ethan, life in the penthouse was becoming a gilded cage of anxiety. The thrill of his promotion had evaporated, replaced by the relentless, grinding pressure of a company under siege. His days were a nightmare of emergency meetings, furious calls from his father-in-law, and the gnawing fear of failure. The Elysian Towers project, his supposed crowning achievement, was turning into a quagmire. The final nail was being hammered in at Argent Materials. Just as Emma had planned, when Thorne's supply contract came up for renewal, the new board, secretly controlled by Phoenix Ascendant, presented their terms. The price increase wasn't just quadruple, it was quintuple, and it was non-negotiable. Ethan sat in the opulent Thorne Development boardroom, across from his father-in-law, listening to the new CEO of Argent Materials on speakerphone. The man's voice was unapologetic. "The price is the price, Mr. Thorne. Global demand, supply chain restructuring. You understand? This is extortion," Arthur Thorne bellowed, slamming his fist on the mahogany table. "It's business," the voice replied coolly, and the line went dead. The entire Elysian Towers project was now catastrophically over budget. Construction ground to a halt. Investors grew nervous. The media, which had once celebrated Thorne's Midas touch, now circled like vultures, sniffing out the scent of decay. The pressure began to fray Ethan's relationship with Isabel. The power couple dynamic vanished, replaced by her mounting resentment and contempt. The man she had picked from obscurity was failing to deliver. "What do you mean construction has stopped?" she demanded one evening, storming into their living room where Ethan was hunched over his laptop, desperately trying to find a new steel supplier. She wasn't wearing one of her glamorous evening gowns, but a severe-looking silk robe. Her face, without the makeup and socialite smile, was hard and unforgiving. "Argent Materials has us in a stranglehold," he mumbled, not looking up. "We can't meet their price. We're trying to find an alternative, but no one can match the volume on such short notice." "You're the vice president of acquisitions," she snapped. "This is your job. You were supposed to be a genius, a shark. Instead, you're just floundering. My father is furious. He said hiring you was the biggest mistake he's ever made." The words were a physical blow. "That's not fair, Isabel. No one could have seen this coming. This Phoenix Ascendant, they're playing a different game." "Then learn the rules," she shot back, her voice dripping with disdain. "Or did you just talk a big game when you wanted to get into my bed and my bank account? I thought I was getting a killer. It turns out I just got a well-dressed secretary who's in over his head." She looked at him, at his expensive suit and the worry etched on his face, and for the first time, he saw not a hint of affection in her eyes. He saw only disgust. It was a look that mirrored the one he had given Emma on the day he left. He was no longer her prize. He was her liability. The realization was sickening. He had traded Emma's unconditional, gentle love for this, for conditional status that could be revoked at the first sign of trouble. The small, warm apartment suddenly seemed like a lost paradise compared to this cold, glass mausoleum. The breaking point for Arthur Thorne came a week later. With the Elysian Towers stalled and creditors circling, his last hope was a massive infusion of capital from a consortium of European investors he had been courting for months. The deal was set to close on a Friday. On Thursday evening, Phoenix Ascendant made its most audacious move yet. They didn't just outbid him, they bought the bank that was brokering the entire deal. The news broke the next morning. Thorne Development's primary lender, Sterling Trust Bank, had been wholly acquired by Phoenix Ascendant Holdings. As the new owners, Phoenix had immediately called in all of Thorne's outstanding high-risk loans, citing material adverse change clauses. It was a corporate checkmate. They had to pay hundreds of millions of dollars within 72 hours or declare bankruptcy. The game was over. An emergency meeting was called. Not just for the board, but for all senior executives. The purpose was grim, to meet the architects of their destruction. The mysterious power behind Phoenix Ascendant had finally agreed to reveal themselves. They were taking over, and they wanted to address the leadership of the company they had just conquered. Ethan walked into the main boardroom with a sense of dread, so profound it felt like he was walking to his own execution. The air was thick with fear and whispered speculation. Arthur Thorne sat at the head of the table, looking 10 years older, his face a gray mask of defeat. Isabel was there too, standing by the wall, her arms crossed, her expression a mixture of fury and humiliation. She refused to even look at Ethan. The double doors of the boardroom swung open. In walked Mr. Harrison, his posture impeccable, his face impassive. He moved to the side, and then she entered. She was not the Emma Finch he had left. This woman was a stranger. Her dark hair was styled in a severe, elegant cut that highlighted her sharp cheekbones. She wore a bespoke navy blue power suit that screamed authority. Her walk was not the gentle shuffle he remembered. It was a confident, measured stride that commanded the room. Her eyes, the same soft, doe-like eyes he had once loved, were now sharp, focused, and as cold as a winter sky. She stopped at the head of the table, opposite Arthur Thorne. A stunned silence fell over the room. Jaws literally dropped. Ethan felt all the blood drain from his face. His heart hammered against his ribs. A frantic, trapped bird. It was impossible. It couldn't be. This was Emma. His Emma. The quiet librarian. The woman who was happy dusting furniture. Arthur Thorne squinted, confused. Who is this? What is the meaning of this intrusion? Emma's gaze swept across the room, lingering for a fraction of a second on Ethan's horrified face before settling on Arthur. Her voice, when she spoke, was not the soft murmur he knew. It was clear, resonant, and laced with an authority that could freeze fire. My name, she said, letting each word land with calculated weight, is Emma Blackwood. I am the founder and CEO of Phoenix Ascendant Holdings, and as of 90 minutes ago, I am the majority owner of this company. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the sound of an entire world breaking. Ethan stared, his mind refusing to process what his eyes were seeing. Blackwood. The name echoed in his memory. He'd heard it whispered in financial circles. An old money dynasty, a global behemoth in shipping, tech, and finance. They were legends, reclusive and powerful beyond imagination. They were the kind of people Arthur Thorne aspired to be. And Emma, his Emma, was one of them. He looked at Isabel, whose face was a mask of disbelief and dawning, utter horror. She was staring at Emma as if she were seeing a ghost. The daughter of a mere real estate tycoon in the presence of true, dynastic royalty. Emma's cold eyes finally locked onto Ethan's. There was no flicker of recognition of their shared past, no hint of emotion. It was the look a queen might give to a particularly uninteresting insect. You wanted an empire, Ethan, she said, her voice echoing in the silent room. Welcome to mine. The boardroom felt like a vacuum, all the air sucked out by Emma's revelation. Ethan's mind was a maelstrom of confusion and terror. Emma Blackwood. It was like finding out the stray cat you'd kicked out was actually a Bengal tiger. Everything he had done, every cruel word he had said, replayed in his head, now cast in a horrifying new light. You're happy in this little box with your dusty books. I need a woman who can build an empire with me, not one who is happy to just dust the furniture. You could never give me the life I deserve. He had been mocking a queen living in disguise. He hadn't just been a fool. He had been a cosmic-level idiot. Arthur Thorne finally found his voice, sputtering, Blackwood? That's impossible. The Blackwoods are reclusive? Emma finished for him, a hint of dry amusement in her tone. She walked slowly around the table, her presence dominating the space. We prefer the term private. I had a desire to see if a life could be built on its own merits, without the weight of a name. If love could be earned, not purchased. It was, as my former husband so astutely pointed out, a very simple existence. Her eyes flickered to Ethan again, and this time, there was a glint of something, not pain, but pure, unadulterated power. Unfortunately, I discovered that some people can only measure worth in dollars, so I decided to return to a language they would understand. She placed her hands on the back of Arthur Thorne's chair. Let me explain the situation in terms you'll appreciate, Arthur. You leveraged your company against the Sky High Properties acquisition, a deal I knew you were overextended on because your own vice president, she gestured dismissively toward Ethan, used to boast about your aggressive, reckless strategies over dinner. Ethan flinched as if he'd been struck. Then, Emma continued, her voice a clinical, steady lecture, you banked your entire flagship project, the Elysian Towers, on a single-source supplier for steel, a contract with a near-term expiration date. Another fascinating tidbit I learned during my simple life. So I bought your supplier. Then I bought your logistics network. Then I bought the bank that held your debt. I didn't just outplay you, Arthur. I took your own chessboard piece by piece and beat you with it. Arthur Thorne slumped in his chair, a broken man. The blustering tycoon was gone, replaced by a pale, trembling old man who saw his life's work dissolving before his eyes. Isabel finally snapped out of her shock, but her fury wasn't directed at Emma. It was a laser beam aimed directly at Ethan. She strode toward him, her face a mask of incandescent rage. "You!" she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "You did this! You brought this down on us! You were married to a goddamn Blackwood and you didn't know it? You idiot! You worthless, pathetic idiot!" She didn't lower her voice. She wanted the whole room to hear. She wanted him stripped of every last shred of dignity. "She was your wife!" Isabel shrieked, now directly in his face. "You had everything! You had the biggest prize of all right in your hands, and you threw it away for what? For me? For a penthouse? My father's company is nothing compared to them. We are nothing compared to her. You didn't trade up, you moron. You traded a kingdom for a cottage, and then you burned the cottage down." She slapped him. The sound cracked through the silent room like a gunshot. It wasn't a dramatic, movie-style slap. It was sharp, vicious, and utterly humiliating. Ethan's head snapped to the side, a red mark blooming on his cheek. He stood there, mute, unable to defend himself. She was right. He had been handed the keys to a world beyond his wildest dreams, and had thrown them in the trash because he was too blind and too arrogant to see their value. "Get out!" Isabel spat, her chest heaving. "Get out of my sight! Get out of my life! The chauffeur is gone. The credit cards are canceled. The clothes in your closet will be donated to charity. Don't ever speak to me again." She turned her back on him, a final public dismissal. Emma watched the entire exchange with the detached curiosity of a scientist observing rats in a maze. When it was over, she addressed the room again. "Mr. Harrison will now be conducting a transitional audit. The Thorne Development name will be dissolved. The assets will be absorbed into a new subsidiary of Phoenix Ascendant focused on sustainable urban development. Your positions are all under review. Those who are competent may be retained. Those who are not—" She left the sentence hanging in the air. Her gaze fell on Ethan one last time. "Oh, and Mr. Cole, you're fired, of course. For cause. Gross incompetence." He was shattered, utterly and completely. In the space of 10 minutes, he had lost his job, his lover, his status, his future, and the last vestiges of his self-respect. He stumbled out of the boardroom, the stares of his former colleagues burning into his back. The walk of shame through the gleaming office he had been so proud of was the longest walk of his life. When he got to the lobby, he instinctively looked for the Rolls-Royce. It wasn't there. He was alone, on the curb, with nothing but the expensive, ill-fitting suit on his back. A week later, Ethan was living in a cheap, pay-by-the-week motel on the industrial outskirts of the city. He had sold the gold watch for a fraction of its value to pay for the room. He had tried calling friends, old colleagues, but the news of his spectacular fall from grace had spread like wildfire. No one wanted to be associated with him. He was toxic. Desperation gnawed at him. He had hit rock bottom and found it was deeper than he could ever have imagined. In a final desperate act of delusion, he decided to go and see Emma. He convinced himself that the woman he had married, the gentle, forgiving Emma, must still be in there somewhere. He could appeal to her. He could beg. He could remind her of the love they once shared. He took a bus to the address of Phoenix Ascendant Holdings. It was an imposing skyscraper of black glass and steel. After being humiliated by 3 layers of security, he was finally told that Ms. Blackwood would grant him 5 minutes. He was escorted up to the top floor. The office was vast and minimalist, with a panoramic view of the city. Emma was not behind her desk. She was standing by the window, looking down at the urban sprawl. She was holding a small, delicate porcelain teacup. "Emma," he began, his voice cracking. "Ellie, please." She turned slowly. Her expression was unreadable. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, tears welling in his eyes. "I was a fool. I was arrogant and stupid and cruel. I know that. But what we had for years, that was real, wasn't it? I loved you. I know I did. I got lost." He took a step closer. "I see it all now. I see what I threw away." Please, Emma. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm begging you. Forgive me. Give me another chance. I can be the man you always wanted." Emma took a slow sip of her tea. She placed the cup and saucer down on a nearby table with a soft clink. "You're right about one thing, Ethan," she said, her voice calm and even. "You were a fool, but you're wrong about the most important part." She looked directly into his eyes, and he saw not a trace of the woman he thought he knew. "The man I loved, the man I married, would never have done what you did. He was kind. He was humble. He valued love over status. That man wouldn't have been tempted by Isabel Thorne because he would have known her worthlessness instantly. That man would have cherished the simple life we built because he would have known it was real." She took a step toward him, and he instinctively recoiled. "You didn't just get lost, Ethan. You made a choice. You looked at 7 years of love, loyalty, and partnership, and you decided it was worth less than a promotion in a penthouse. The man I loved died that day. You are just the hollow thing he left behind." Her words were not angry. They were a simple statement of fact, delivered with the finality of a judge's sentence. "There is nothing to forgive," she concluded, "because the person you betrayed no longer exists, and the person standing here before you owes you nothing, least of all, a second chance." She turned her back to him and looked out the window again. "Mr. Harrison will see you out. Goodbye, Ethan." It was the end. He knew it. There was no appeal, no negotiation. He had burned the bridge and then dynamited the foundations. He had destroyed the one good thing in his life out of pure, pathetic greed, and there was no coming back from it. He had chased an empire and lost his soul, only to find out the woman he'd left behind owned the world. The downfall of Ethan Cole and Thorne Development wasn't the end of the story for Emma Blackwood. It was the beginning. The vengeance had been swift and absolute, but she found the victory felt hollow. Destroying them hadn't healed the wound of betrayal. It had only cauterized it. True recovery, she realized, wouldn't come from tearing things down, but from building something new and meaningful. Phoenix Ascendant, under her direct leadership, did not proceed with the Elysian Towers project. The idea of building a monument to obscene luxury on the foundations of such a bitter victory felt wrong. Instead, she announced a radical new vision. The project was to be completely redesigned and rebranded as the Blackwood Arts and Living Initiative. The Twin Towers would not be filled with multi-million-dollar condos for the elite. Instead, one tower would be converted into high-quality, subsidized housing for artists, teachers, and nonprofit workers. The very people who give a city its soul but are so often priced out of it. The second tower would become a world-class public arts center, featuring galleries for emerging artists, state-of-the-art performance spaces, workshops, and a permanent, free-to-the-public collection of modern art funded by a new foundation she established. The news sent a different kind of shockwave through the city. The media, which had breathlessly covered the corporate drama, was now fascinated by this philanthropic pivot. Emma, who had fiercely guarded her privacy, began to cautiously step into the public eye. Not as a ruthless corporate raider, but as a patron of the arts and a champion for community-focused urban development. She gave selective interviews, always steering the conversation away from her personal life and towards the work of her foundation. She found a new purpose that integrated both sides of her identity. The quiet, book-loving Emma Finch found joy in curating the galleries and meeting the young artists whose careers she was now launching. The powerful, decisive Emma Blackwood expertly navigated the complex worlds of construction, finance, and city politics to bring her vision to life. She was no longer hiding one part of herself to accommodate the other. She was whole. Mr. Harrison watched the transformation with quiet pride. "Your grandfather would be immensely proud, Miss Emma," he said one afternoon as they toured the bustling construction site. "He always believed the Blackwood fortune should be a force for creation, not just accumulation." "He was right," Emma said, a genuine smile gracing her lips, something Ethan had never seen in her CEO persona. "This feels more like winning than anything that happened in that boardroom." She never saw Isabel Thorne again. The Thorne family, disgraced and financially ruined, sold what remained of their assets and retreated from public life. Moving to a modest home in a different state, The society pages that had once fawned over Isabel now printed whispers of her working a quiet job in event planning, stripped of the glamour and power she had once wielded so cruelly. As for Ethan, his fall was as complete as it was possible to be. Blacklisted from the financial industry, he spiraled. He took a series of menial jobs, unable to keep any of them for long. His arrogance was a poor substitute for actual skills in the real world, and his bitterness was a constant poison. One rainy afternoon, about a year after the takeover, Emma was leaving a meeting at the construction site. Her driver was waiting with an umbrella, but she paused, her eyes drawn to a man clearing tables at a small, greasy spoon diner across the street. He was hunched over, his movements slow and defeated. He wore a stained apron over a cheap frayed shirt. It was Ethan. He looked up, and for a fleeting moment, their eyes met across the rain-swept street. There was no recognition in his gaze at first, just the dull, empty look of a man burdened by exhaustion. Then a flicker. His eyes widened in shock and shame. He quickly turned away, hiding his face, and scurried back into the diner's kitchen like a frightened animal. Emma felt a pang, not of pity or triumph, but of a strange, distant sorrow for the man he once was, and for the love she had once felt. He was a ghost from a life that no longer belonged to her. She got into her car and didn't look back. Her life was no longer defined by him or by her family name, but by the legacy she was choosing to build. Later that evening, she stood alone in one of the unfinished galleries of her art center. The scent of drywall and fresh paint filled the air, the smell of a new beginning. Through the vast floor-to-ceiling windows, the city lights twinkled like a sea of promise. She wasn't just looking at the skyline anymore. She was shaping it, and for the first time in a very long time, Emma Blackwood Finch felt completely and authentically at peace. 2 years passed. The name Thorne was a forgotten footnote in the city's financial history. The Blackwood Arts and Living Initiative, once just an audacious blueprint, was now a celebrated reality. Its 2 towers stood not as symbols of cold wealth, but as beacons of community and creativity. The residential tower had a waiting list a mile long, and the Arts Center had become the vibrant heart of the city's cultural scene, praised in architecture and art journals worldwide. Emma had found her rhythm. She was no longer just Emma Finch or Emma Blackwood. She was simply Emma. Her days were filled with meaning, from board meetings about new philanthropic ventures to afternoons spent walking through the galleries, speaking with the young artists she sponsored. The ghosts of her past had been laid to rest. The wound Ethan had inflicted had scarred over, no longer tender to the touch. She was at peace, secure in the world she had built for herself. It was on a crisp autumn afternoon that a ghost of a different sort materialized. She was in her office, the same panoramic suite that had once been the stage for Ethan's final humiliation, now a warm space filled with art and architectural models. Mr. Harrison entered, his usually unflappable demeanor showing a rare crack. He held a single cream-colored envelope, sealed with a familiar, imposing wax signet, a stark, black raven, the seal of her father. "This arrived by a private courier, Miss Emma," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "From the Blackwood estate." Emma's breath hitched. She hadn't received direct communication from her father, Gideon Blackwood, in over a decade. He was the patriarch, the cold, calculating architect of the family empire, and the very reason she had fled into anonymity in the first place. His approval was a currency she had long ago stopped trying to earn. "What does he want?" she asked, her voice quiet. "He doesn't say," Mr. Harrison replied, "but his jet was tracked landing at the executive airport an hour ago." A chill that had nothing to do with the autumn air crept down Emma's spine. Her father never traveled for pleasantries. His movements were as strategic as a general's. An hour later, her assistant announced an unscheduled visitor. Emma didn't need to ask who it was. She stood and faced the door, her heart a steady, heavy drum against her ribs. Gideon Blackwood was a man who seemed to absorb the light in any room he entered. Tall and severe, with a mane of silver hair and eyes the color of storm clouds, he carried an aura of absolute ancient power. He was followed by 2 severe-looking men in dark suits who remained by the door. Gideon surveyed her office, his gaze lingering on a vibrant, abstract sculpture with clear disapproval. "Emma," he said. His voice was not loud, but it had a gravelly resonance that demanded obedience. "You've been busy." "Father," she replied, her tone even. "This is an unexpected visit." "I've been reading about you in the papers," he said, ignoring her pleasantry. He walked over to the window, staring down at the city. "The Wall Street Journal, Forbes, even Architectural Digest. You've made quite a spectacle of yourself." There was no pride in his voice, only condescension. "This initiative, wasting a prime real estate asset on subsidized housing and finger painting classes. It's a sentimental folly." "I call it an investment in people," Emma countered, refusing to be intimidated. "Something the Blackwood Global portfolio is severely lacking." A flicker of annoyance crossed his face. "Do not lecture me on the nature of our portfolio. It is the portfolio that afforded you the luxury of running away to play house with a pathetic social climber for 7 years. A man, I might add, who you allowed to humiliate you before you finally remembered who you were." The mention of Ethan was a deliberate jab, meant to remind her of her perceived weakness. "What I did to Ethan Cole was business," Emma said coolly, "just as you would have done." "Destroying a third-rate developer is not business. It's pest control," Gideon retorted. "What I am here to discuss is real business. Phoenix Ascendant has become notable. Your market strategies have been aggressive and effective. You have proven you retain some of the Blackwood instinct, despite your artistic detour." He turned fully to face her, his eyes pinning her in place. "This independent venture is over. It has served its purpose as a therapeutic exercise. It's time to come home. I am here to formally absorb Phoenix Ascendant and all its assets back into the parent company. You will be given a seat on the Blackwood Global Board. Your pet projects will be liquidated, and your capital will be redirected towards our new acquisitions in the Asian energy sector. It is time to stop playing and start working." It was the moment she had always dreaded, the choice she had run away to avoid. He wasn't asking. He was informing her of a decision already made. He saw her success not as her own, but as family property to be reclaimed. The old fear, the feeling of being a helpless teenager trapped under his thumb, washed over her. For a moment, she felt her resolve waver. But then she looked around her office, at the art she had chosen, the plans for a new children's literacy center on her desk, the view of the towers she had built not for profit, but for people. This was hers. She had forged it not from the Blackwood name, but from the ashes of Emma Finch's broken heart. She straightened her shoulders, meeting his icy gaze with a fire of her own. "No," she said. The word hung in the air, simple and absolute. Gideon Blackwood was a man who was rarely, if ever, told no. He raised an eyebrow. "I don't believe I asked you a question." "And I am not giving you an option," Emma replied, her voice gaining strength. "Phoenix Ascendant is not a pet project. It is my company. It is my legacy. It is not and never will be for sale, especially not to you." She walked toward him, stopping a few feet away. "You taught me to be ruthless in business, Father. You taught me that power is something you take and defend. I have learned the lesson well. This empire is mine. You will not absorb it. You will not control it. And you will not liquidate a single part of the good it does in this world to fund another one of your soulless corporate raids." Gideon stared at her, a muscle twitching in his jaw. He was seeing not his runaway daughter, but a rival, a true Blackwood, defiant and unyielding. The fury in his eyes was palpable. "You would stand against your own family?" he asked, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "I am not standing against the family," Emma said with chilling finality. "I am redefining it. You are welcome to visit the galleries anytime, Father. But as for my business, you and your men can see yourselves out." Gideon Blackwood held her gaze for a long, silent moment, a silent war being waged between them. Then, without another word, he turned on his heel and strode out of the office, his guards falling into step behind him. Mr. Harrison, who had been standing silently by the door, let out a slow breath he seemed to have been holding. "Miss Emma," he said, a deep and profound respect in his voice. "That was formidable." Emma felt a tremor run through her, the adrenaline of the confrontation finally hitting. She had stood up to the one person who had always terrified her. She had defended her life, her work, and her identity. She knew this wasn't the end. It was a declaration of war. A new battle, far more dangerous than the one with Ethan, was just beginning. But for the first time, she knew with absolute certainty that she had the strength to fight it and to win. In the end, this wasn't just a story of revenge. It was a story about value. Ethan Cole saw value only in money and status, and in his blindness, he discarded a treasure beyond his comprehension. Emma learned a painful lesson, that hiding your own worth doesn't protect you from those who will never see it anyway. Her real victory wasn't in ruining her ex-husband, it was in reclaiming her own power and using it to build something beautiful from the rubble of his betrayal. She proved that the greatest empire you can build is a life lived authentically on your own terms. What did you think of Emma's journey from a heartbroken wife to a powerhouse philanthropist? Was Ethan's fate a just one? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of karma and empowerment, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to be reminded of their own worth, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life drama and incredible stories. Thanks for listening.